Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. Before we get into introductions, I'm trying to be better at this when I do guest interviews because sometimes I just forget. So I don't want to forget, but I do want to ask you before we jump in, what is one thing that you didn't sign up for?
Huh. Uh, Paying for everything, like how much money I spend on hired help in order to just maintain like an average life, it feels like, as far as like I want to go work out or I want to take a shower, like basic needs. I want to take a shit. And it's like I had no idea that like when you were going to become a parent that those were things you were going to have to negotiate, not only with yourself but with your partner, or again like pay and hire that support team. And that just wasn't clear to me, and I don't think I knew how intense that need was going to be.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And I feel like growing up, and then when I became a new mom, I felt like I had to do it all on my own. Like I couldn't even imagine hiring someone to clean my house. And it's actually funny because I do vividly remember a conversation that my parents were having when I was younger. We were in the car. I remember exactly where we were. And my parents were talking about hiring a house cleaner. And my mom was a stay at home mom. She had 6 kids. She was like PTA president. She was like really involved in the church that we went to. Like she did all the things. And she said that she didn't want to hire a cleaner for the house because it's her job and something that she should be able to do. And at the time, I don't know, I was like 10, I was really young. So I didn't really think about it at that time. But now, as like an adult, it's just like those small things that kind of just are very impressionable to you. So going into motherhood, I felt like, oh, I have to do the cleaning, I have to do the cooking, I can't delegate anything, I have to do it all. Plus, I have a full-time job on top of that. But I'm convinced that no one can do it alone.
No, and it's that word should that your mom even used of like, "Oh, I should do it," or "It's my job," or the worst is when we're like, "We're capable, sure, and we're even available sometimes to do it." But what I really try to hone in on is like, does it bring you joy? Do you even like doing it? Like, if you don't, if it's so much dread, if it's a low joy task that not only you don't want to do, but your partner doesn't want to do either, then that's when it's such an easy yes for me to be like, this is a delegatable task. Like this is I'm going to outsource, whether it's in your case, that house cleaner, a laundry delivery service, something to take off that thing on my plate that, like Brene Brown says, like you're shitting all over yourself. You're shitting all over yourself. It's like,
I
I
love
feel like
that.
I've said shit now like 3 times in your podcast in like 5 minutes,
That's okay. Hey.
it's those shoulds that get in the way of, I think, our joy and motherhood.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And eventually, I did end up hiring a house cleaner like a year or so ago when I became a single mom, because I was like, I'm working full time. I'm starting a business. I did a lot of work with a coach. She was actually on my podcast as well. She kind of talks about some of the same things that you do, but basically just like giving yourself permission. It's like, can you truly afford to pay someone? And I was like, yes, I can. And it's like, okay, well, you have to like think about that in relation to like the other things that you're doing. Anyway, long story short, I hired a cleaner. And then when I quit my corporate job a few months ago, I just wasn't really sure like what my income was going to be. And I was in like this weird spot. So I stopped doing the cleaners for a few months. And it was like, my life was over. I was like, oh my God, I got to clean my own toilets now. And then I recently hired them back, but it's definitely a service. Like once you have it, it's really hard to go back.
Yeah, and it's like the opportunity cost, throwing in some economic terms here though, but of your energy and time and that like a mental headspace, like I think of that as dread, where it's like, but what could you be doing instead? And if it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's going to earn you money instead of cleaning the toilet. It's more like, are you taking some time for self-care? Because we need to recalibrate. Like kids drain us so badly and they're overstimulating and they need constantly. And so maybe instead of cleaning the toilet or doing that little laundry, like you did take that walk outside and listen to a podcast that you love, a little self-care and a little more self-knowledge. Or maybe it is that dread, like you said, like it's just you dreaded it so much that it's like that drains your energy and you kind of felt like again, those shoulds creeping in, that it's less about even the physical task of cleaning the toilet. It's more like, I don't want to do it. And so it's really paying attention, I think, to those like internal dialogue and absolutely like that permission, giving yourself permission to buy that time.
Yeah, I think that we're worth it. And our lives, honestly, in my opinion, can't just all be about work or tasks or, like we've got to enjoy part of our life. Right. And so I think thinking about it in that way is like, yeah, I could do this, but taking the walk or going, and visiting with a friend instead of cleaning the house, like those are the things that actually make life enjoyable and not just on this, in the rat race, like just going, going, going. Like we need to take that time to slow down. Perfect. Well, let's go ahead and let's introduce yourself. I feel like you
Yeah.
kind of have in a lot of ways. Like we're already kind of jumped into what we're talking about. But for those who don't know, who are you and what is Peacock Parent? And what is your mission?
So I'm Christine Landis. I'm the founder of Peacock Parent. And so let's see, I have two kids, a 5-year-old boy and a 3-year-old little girl. I've been married for 15 years and I have a really good life, is the truth. I think an important part to just openly talk about is I had sold my company for 8 figures. My husband is currently a CEO of a big fintech company. So financially, we're more than comfortable. And I think that's really led me. I say all that not to brag in any way at all. It's really just, it's a foundation of part of the story of Peacock Parent, where I found myself as a former CEO really applying a lot of the business mentality to how I ran my home and how I kind of approached motherhood as far as hiring support. And at first I thought it was a money thing. I thought, okay, I have the money to hire the support. So that must be why, I'm doing it and others aren't. And sure, there might be a small portion of that that's true, but a lot of it was, again, that permission, that the shoulds, and then the lack of resources, the lack of knowledge of even some of these services that exist out there to support us, let alone kind of someone saying it's okay to do this. This is not your job to do it all. So I think that's really the core premise of Peacock Parent, is to really help parents, feel comfortable delegating these low joy tasks, finding and providing really a resource bank of here's trusted, unbiased services that can help you. Since I'm self-funded, like I don't need to accept brand partnerships or get paid to endorse something. And I'm just taking the time to really try to vet all of these so that there is one space people can come to over time when they're interested in, like, what does support look like? How, for especially different stages of parenthood. That's the nuts and bolts of it. Just valuing time differently and being willing to buy it.
So, if someone went to Peacock Parent, your website, what type of information would they find on there? Is it resources for families to find a service or something in order to delegate a task? Do you just kind of help them through that process?
Yeah. So a lot of it right now, we're in the process of building out a platform that will really match you up. I kind of think of it as like Groupon meets Consumer Reports with a little match.com as far as based on, again, your stage of parenting, your income, your lifestyle, we'll kind of build out for you a roadmap of, okay, well, here's the best bang for your buck of what can free up more time and bring you more joy. Because at the end of the day, the joy is about spending more quality time with the people you love. And it's not cleaning the toilet, most likely for somebody.
Yeah.
And so it's half of the resources available. There are vetted concierge services right now that we just list for free. They're not gated at all. There's a ton of discount codes. That's why I say Groupon. A big part of our mission is to make things more accessible for people. And so we ask for preferred pricing with all of our partners that we identify as being the best. We don't take any referral fees on the back end. It's all about trying to pass everything off to the client. So that they can try these resources out. Because that's, again, money is one roadblock, but the other is that mindset and that permission. There's also a ton of
Yeah.
free guides on there too, that help you, again, delegation, ideas of what to delegate, who to hire for support, even defining your joy. Like, what do I do with this time that I just bought? That's another thing that scares people.
Yeah. I felt that when I got divorced and then I had split custody with my kids and then the kids would go with their dad and I'm like, "Oh, like what do I do with all this time?" Which is amazing and sounds great and it is. But when you're not used to that and you've been pouring yourself into your children for my daughter was almost 6 at the time. For 6 years, like my life had been being a mom and working, and I almost never had alone time. So it was like, oh, what do I do? Like, I don't know what I enjoy. I don't know what my hobbies are. And it was actually very difficult to just sit with myself and try new things. But I found a lot of joy kind of getting over like that initial hump. So I feel like that's like a real issue.
Yeah, it is. And again, going back to those shoulds, it's like we're told that you must be 1000% selfless once you become a parent and it's all about the kids. And I mean, of course you want your kids to be happy. You want them to be safe, and but I think we've given up too much of like our freedom, a little too much of our control over our time and our happiness and our joy. That doesn't all have to be derived from our kids. Again, a huge part of it is that quality family time, but there's also some self-care. Self-care equals family care. And we're having more conversations at large. Don't get me wrong, in this industry. I think that it's not a new topic, but it's really only one that I think has been more accepted as a space that we're lacking in the last year maybe, like year or two max. That's not that long for all of us to feel
Yeah.
like, oh crap, it's okay if we want to do something for ourselves.
Yeah, I think that in the last like couple of years, I feel like it has been talked about more where like people are given permission. Like you can pay for these services, you don't have to do it all. But at the same time, I know that it's kind of a difficult concept for people to grasp onto because usually with these services there are fees associated with them. And I've worked with companies in the past that offer similar types of services where you basically delegate tasks to a service and they will just like handle them for you and then they relay the messaging to you. And it makes it really easy. But obviously, there's a service charge associated with that. And it's not very much money, but I think that it's hard for people to really wrap their brain around spending an extra like $40, $50 a month on something that they can do themselves, even though it really is like freeing up a lot of their time. So, what would you say to maybe people who struggle with paying for a service um, that maybe they don't necessarily need or have to have, but it would definitely help improve their lives?
It all comes down to joy for me. I think it's what is doing that task, whether it's like filling out the school paperwork, or coordinating, maybe it's the family trip that you're really excited about, but it's also like I have to research the hotels and see who's like what's the family friendly and what's the best rates, and all the little nitty gritty of it that almost takes away from some of the joy of the actual experience. Really identify, like, do I like this? And that's the most simplest version to start with, is truly, do I enjoy doing this? And that's in one of our guides. It's 99 ways to delegate tasks today. I list out, it's a whole step-by-step process of examples of different tasks you can delegate, whether it's a virtual assistant, an in-person, a nanny or family assistant, housekeeper, whatever it may be. But the first question we go through is, does this bring you joy? Do you enjoy it? Because there's some tasks that to me, like grocery shopping, I don't want to get in my car, prep to leave the house, drive over somewhere, park, deal with like lines and all that of grocery shopping. I'd rather just do it online. So to me, that's like such an obvious, like $10 to Amazon. There you go, Jeff Bezos, take it. And for others, though, they really love grocery shopping, so that's why it's really different for each person. But it starts with, what do you like doing? And again, being really honest with yourself. And no one's watching, no one's judging you. There's no shoulds. What do you like?
Yeah, I think one thing that really changed it for me in the last couple of years and thinking about it differently, and maybe this, I don't know if you agree or not, but obviously, like making sure, like one, you can afford it, you can actually like it's not putting you in debt paying for like these services. But I think a lot of time, what happens is that people say, "Oh, I can't afford something," even though they technically can. Like if you really look at like the budget and like their income or your income, it's like I actually can afford this, but I just like have told myself my whole life I can't spend money on Starbucks. I feel like that's like the Dave Ramsey method where it's like you can't spend any extras until your house is paid off, your retirement fund is there, and you have your emergency fund. I feel like that was like kind of the mindset I grew up with. So it's like, yeah,
Mhm.
technically I can't afford it, but you just have to think about it differently. Like, one, can you afford it? Yes, if you can, then like, yeah, like, is this something that is going to be worth it to you, with your time, your joy, other things like that, and just kind of decide. And then just like giving yourself permission to do it.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add to that is you're so right. Of we have been trained to save, 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 save. Again, that sacrifice mentality. And I think it's that reminder again of like you're living today. Like I mean, there are just
Mhm.
I'm not trying to like spread fear, but there is no guarantee of anything else in the future. There's just not. And so this may be more personal on my side. My mother did die really suddenly from breast cancer 10 years ago. And so I think I do have a perspective of kind of understanding that, she was 65. That's not like terribly
No.
young and it's not terribly old. It's like it's in that space where you're like, wait, I thought I had like 10 or 15 more years here. And so there was a lot of plans. Like they didn't fly first class in their lives and they were just going to start traveling and because they were saving, because they were doing the right thing their whole life by, not doing anything out of scope. And I say all that in the respect that it's important to not lose sight of the joy that you're experiencing today at the cost of saving for joy later, because you can't control joy later. You don't know what will come. And I'm not encouraging anyone to deplete their savings or go into debt or anything over, a service that will do that to your bottom line. But I think that it's important to get away from that sacrifice mentality as a parent and as a person for yourself.
You talk a lot about running your home like a business. I want to dig a little bit more into that. Because I know that even in my own relationship, like it's come up a couple of different times about like, especially now that my girls are getting older and they're in school and they have way more activities. We do this on every Sunday. We'll sit down and have like a family meeting with me and my partner, and we'll talk about what's going on for the week, who's taking the kids to school, who's picking them up, what appointments, and like blah blah blah, all that's boring business like stuff. And like initially, I mean, he was great, he's on board and he's seeing how it's improving our communication, but at the very beginning it was a little difficult because he was like, I don't want to be like, this is like a business meeting, like we're in a relationship, this is our family, it's not a business meeting. So I want to dig into that a little bit more. So can you tell me a little bit about why you adopted running your home like a business?
For sure. So, I mean, I think in my time as a former CEO, it was just natural to me to think of, my time as money, and that if to stay organized, to think about efficiency first, to really analyze again the time and the dollars and cents of, what makes sense for me to be doing versus to delegate it out to somebody else. And I think most importantly, it was this recognition of I can't do it all. I'm not the CEO and involved in every project development meeting. I can't be on every CRM call. I have to hire and train and trust and empower these other people around me to carry out the mission and the vision. So bringing that back down to more kind of simple terms is that it really comes down to time management and efficiency. If the job can get done faster and it's a low joy task for me, then I'm delegating it. And we do that so easily in business. We know that we have executive assistants. We, again, know we can't do it all. And yet we struggle to adopt this in our home. And I think the other area that you hit on is just that organization and planning. There's no way a business grows without a business plan, without, goals, without a strategy. And to think that, that doesn't exist in our own home lives, or why it wouldn't exist in our home lives is a little bananas to me. We do the exact same thing where we sit down and plan, and we can talk about that a little bit more later, but we plan our week, same thing. It's also just building in a repeatable process, something you can count on, and it keeps our communication really open. So yeah, I think it comes down to efficiency, time management, and again, that ultimate profit. If you think of it in a business, sure, there's this dollar quantifiable, but what if for you it was more time, more joy, more quality time with your family? And if you start planning and thinking about things from that perspective, it can really change what I think you give your own self permission to do.
Let's say they're not really running their household like a business. Are there a few easy things that they can maybe start doing today to kind of start running their house like a business?
So I think the first recommendation would be to plan your week with your partner. It's truly the best thing you can do. It's I do have a blog post about it on that I go into a lot of detail, but 50 minutes is what I recommend. And I know that's a little intimidating, but you can sit down with them, put it on the schedule, make it a reoccurring appointment. And that way you both know that yes, it's a meeting, yes, it's an appointment, but parenting is a job. So let's treat it that way. Let's stop hoping and thinking that everything's organically going to work out. And most importantly, you need your partner there with you. I think that's my number one most biggest recommendation of starting it is they have to be on the same page. You can't run this business by yourself. You need them there with you in that meeting and planning your week, really thinking ahead of all the different meals and all the different activities and planning for joy for that matter will really allow it to be a process that I think you both will start looking forward to because you'll actually go to Legoland. Not because you didn't actually wake up that day and go, "Oh, we should do Legoland today." Like, it's you've made all the arrangements, you've bought the tickets, you know what time you're waking up, you've thought it through. And so that alone I think would be my first recommendation, and the only follow-up I have there would be a virtual assistant. I think a virtual assistant is in a phenomenal way for anyone for anywhere from like, $100 to $200 is kind of the range of ones I've found. They can do a lot of those low joy tasks. And in that meeting that you plan your week, that's when you identify, okay, that's something I don't want to do, or that's a reservation we need to make. Let's assign that to this other person. So
Yeah, I love that. I've struggled myself hiring a virtual assistant, and I've thought about it so many times, and I know in my brain that I need to do it for like my businesses, and then also just some of like those mundane tasks, like as a parent. But it's hard to give up control. I don't know if that's something that you've ever struggled with, but I've thought about it so many times like, oh, it's just easier if I do it. Do you have any recommendations for kind of getting over like that initial hump of like delegating something and then like trusting that they're going to do it and they're going to do a good job at it?
yeah, you might not like this answer, but it takes time. Basically, it takes more time on your part to write out the instructions, for example. Like if you have a housekeeper that you don't have them do laundry because you're like, no, they're just going to mess it up. I have it a certain way I like to do it, or, whatever it may be, whether I like to fold my laundry a certain way, then take the time to take pictures of the actual process of you or a video of you folding that laundry or write out in a document exactly what type of bleach you do or don't want to use. I mean, it's again going back to that business mentality of you're creating a SOPs, an operating procedure, and you're doing that for anyone that's going to help you now or in the future. And that's what is really wonderful about it is that once you write it down, once you take the time to do a training to that person or take the time to, again, pass that knowledge over, you've equipped them with all the tools they need to get the job done well. You've done everything you can. If they then don't do it well, then that's a bummer. Like that's a
Yeah.
loss for sure. But the likelihood of that happening is pretty low if you take the time to train them. And I think that's the piece that stops a lot of people from asking for help, let alone hiring it, is because they go, I'll just do it myself. It's easier.
Yeah.
And that might be true in that one moment. I can't argue that, but it's not going to help you the next time and the next time and the next time after that. It's not going to free you up ever again to have a choice in how you spend your time. And that's where real freedom in parenthood happens, is when you choose whether you want to do that activity or not, because you could delegate it to someone else, or maybe that day you do feel like folding the laundry. But being the only person that can do one thing is really limiting, and that's constricting as a parent.
Yeah, I know that from working my corporate job for many years. I mean, we had many different SOPs, and sometimes what would often happen, this is like a little like off topic a bit, but yeah, that was like the thing that they would say all the time is like, oh, this one person knows how to do this, but like, what happens if something happens to them or they leave, or well, then we don't know. And so it was really important to like keep up those SOPs, and a lot of time and resources went into them. Like it was kind of crazy. But ultimately, like that's how you had to like run this department that I was in, because yeah, there would be movement, and it's not just one person that knows something. It needs to be written down, so it can kind of be there forever. So I like that
Yeah.
mentality. When you're planning your week with your husband, I want to dig into this, because I think that's a really good place for people to just start. Like it's one easy thing you can set. I know you say 50 minutes, but even if you start with 30 minutes and then just kind of see how it goes, I think it's a good starting point. So I want to dig into that a little bit more. But so when you go into the meeting, what type of tasks are you um, are you delegating tasks, or what does the meeting look like really from like start to finish?
So it's funny, my husband actually leads the meeting and he starts us off by saying, let's just look at our week at a high level. And we kind of go through it, just seeing if there's anything major that's like popping out at us, a big party or a big like school event or something that needs our attention. And then we go through each day by category and we talk about our activities for the kids and like each day where are the kids, who has school drop off and pick up. A lot of these things are repeatable calendar entries that we have, so we're not having to like re-enter everything every week. It's more just reconfirming, and a lot of that's going up against our availability. So that's a really key piece of planning your week, is that yes, you're planning for to make sure the kids are safe and that they're accounted for and that they have things to do, but you're also really acknowledging you as people both sometimes have other things going on. So whether it's a work obligation, maybe it is time for quiet time for me as a mom, that I want to go for a walk that day, or we are going to go on a date as a couple. And so really figuring out, when are we available, when are we not available. We talk about our social calendar. And funny enough, that's the last thing we go over because we find that when we really focus on our own kids and activities and adventures and our own, again, individual and couple availability, we're practically capped out at that point. Like there's
Yeah.
things that have almost either already come up where it's like, oh, we're already going to that birthday party, or, but it makes it easier to control, again, what you're doing with your time. And I think you're being more proactive in how you're spending it instead of reactive. And I think the reactivity of, you're going to get invited to a lot of birthday parties, you're going to get invited, to a dinner party or the concert or something that might be coming up. And all of a sudden you kind of feel like, oh my God, I'm so busy. But this, I think, gives you that pause to, as a couple and individual in that moment, to really think about, where are we spending our time? And that's really a key element to planning your week.
Do you use any specific apps or tools to kind of stay organized? I know that for me, I have an iPhone and then my partner has an Android. So we use Google Calendar, but I don't know if there's like a better way. But do you have any tips for, couples on that?
So Google Calendar is my best friend too. We technically both have iPhones, but I love Google Calendar. We have a household calendar, so that way that's where a lot of those reoccurring appointments stay. Anyone that's scheduled, whether it's a babysitter or nanny, in-law, anyone that's helping, that's on there. So we all kind of know availability. Anyone that is supporting our household has access to that household calendar, so that way they have access to all the information I know. There's no reason you need to ask me about something, whether that's my partner asking me when someone shows up or that person wanting to verify where we'll be. It's all the information is there. I love Trello. And again, it's another one. It's a tool I used at work. It's a project management, almost think of it as like electronic Post-it notes. And it's a great way to track your to-do list. And the other one really, email obviously, but that's another tip I do have, is don't use text, like email when you need to direct somebody about, whether it is to delegate a task or whether it's to follow up on an appointment or reminder between your household. Text it gets lost. Your emotion doesn't come through text very well. Either wait to have an individual face-to-face conversation if it's something bigger, or if it's just informational, email it so you don't interrupt someone's moment.
I like that. I like that a lot. Not doing the text message, because I'm a very distracted person. So when I get that text notification, I often have to put my phone on do not disturb because it's so bad. So I
Yeah,
like
and
that.
it's like it interrupts your moment and your day, and like over something that's not urgent. Save a text for urgent or just pick up the phone at that point. But we've gotten too, I think, intense on the texting for just mundane stuff that doesn't need you in that exact moment.
Yeah. And then what suggestions do you have for couples who maybe one partner doesn't want to plan every minute of their life, and then maybe that's met with resistance?
I think the first thing is to sit them down and have a conversation, again, not by text, not by email, but really sit down and explain to them that this is almost more of a mental health request. This is a support that you're asking them, that, it's not a war over whose style is right or wrong, whether to plan or not to plan. It's just, this is how you're going to experience more joy as a parent, is if you have a high level understanding of what's coming and you want their input, you want them to be there with you. I think also ease their mind. There's nothing that's concrete. You're planning. It can always get unplanned, but you like to know, you like to look forward to things, you like to anticipate. That's part of what brings you joy. And then I think, at the end of the day, you're also saying, I'm asking for your time. I'm asking for 50 minutes out of 168 hours in a week. And if they can't give you that, then I think that's more truly a couples counseling conversation. It might seem so silly being like, well, he just doesn't like to plan. It's no big deal, but it's so much bigger than planning. It's being involved in your entire household and your entire life and your all of your joy, because it's about your kids. It's about the time you need. It's about the time you guys need together. So it's not just an individual ask. It's fine to take ownership that it helps you mentally or it helps your anxiety or whatever it is. But that's a big one for me if you had a partner that just wasn't willing to show up for that conversation.
Yeah,
Big
well,
red
and
flag.
I feel like moms are just doing this anyways, like whether we're sitting down and actually writing it out on a calendar or adding things into, our phones and writing to-do lists, whether we're actually doing that or just thinking it in our brains constantly. Like we're moms for the most part. I'm sure that there's some dads out there that do it as well. But we're already doing it anyways. And so, yeah, I like the idea of like bringing your partner into that. This is what I'm already doing. This is what's going through
Mhm.
my brain. And I want to bring you in on that because this is, our family, and let's see how we can work together on that. So I like that a lot. Do you have any strategies towards like delegating different tasks with your partner during these types of meetings? Is it a conversation? How do those conversations go?
Yeah, that's such a great point. So when you're actually the meeting, that's funny. So the planning is simply, it's not the doing meeting. You're just planning. So you're not actively trying to get any of these tasks done yourself. You're almost just taking ownership of, if it's, school picture day and you need to make sure you guys get him a new shirt for it, then like one of you is going to just take on like, okay, I'm going to add that to my list. I'll do it later. So you're not actually like you're taking the note in that meeting, but you're not doing anything about it in that meeting. For us, that's when we use Trello and we add it
Mm,
to our list because we do have a family assistant. We have two family assistants for that matter. And so we'll go over in our weekly meeting on Mondays. We sit down with our team, and that's when we really talk through here's the things we need your help with. And again, that's where a virtual family assistant can do a lot of these things. We just simply have someone that's physically there. It's wonderful, but that's not for everyone. But that's the actual delegating happens separately. For now, you're just simply planning it and you're taking notes on what needs to be delegated. And then there's a separate meeting really for delegating.
okay, so just to clarify, so um, back to school is going on right now, and we're actually about to do back to school shopping this week for my kids. So let's say we were in a meeting, me and my partner, and we were talking about that. Um, it would just get brought up that we need to do, or that we're going to do back to school shopping this week because school starts following week. But we wouldn't actually assign who is doing that task or who is responsible for that. We would just like kind of put it out there, right?
So in that case, like I would have you plan when you're going to do it. So I would have you put a
Okay.
calendar entry of like looking at the calendar. Because first of all, it's more like, hey, do we want to do it together? Like we just did this with my 3-year-old because she's starting preschool. So my husband and
Mhm.
I made time, just the three of us, to go to Nordstrom's and we got lunch with her. And
Oh, fun.
so we made sure we looked at the calendar in that exact moment and figured out availability and put it on the books so that everyone would know where we were and we could plan, including driving time, of what to section off for work. So that's different to me than delegating because you're not delegating that task. That's more of a you're scheduling it. So it's a great question, Caitlin, and clarification. I
Yeah.
appreciate it because scheduling happens in the planning. It's the doing that happens separately.
Okay.
Does that
Okay, I
make
see what you mean.
sense?
Yep, that does make sense. Yeah, thanks for
Okay.
that. Perfect. And then great. I want to talk more about self-care because I know that's something that you talk a lot about. We kind of touched on it a little bit. But self-care is really tough for parents because I mean time is limited and it seems like every free moment is usually filled with something. It's usually filled with something for someone else or kids, whatever. So what tips do you have for parents who want to carve out time for themselves but don't feel like they can without sacrificing time with their husband or their kids or work? Do you have any strategies for that?
Yeah. So I think plan for joy is my biggest takeaway for people is that physically in that planning of the week, we do talk about our alone time. And really that's a version of self-care for each of us. And so we go through and figure out, my husband, like when he can go walk the dog. And he then puts that on the schedule. So we know in the household, like he's not available during that time. And that's okay. It doesn't need to be this excuse that I'm working and that's why I'm not available. You're allowed to just be unavailable sometimes and for yourself. And I think that fear of missing out on more family time with the kids, I'd really argue it's the opposite. It's like when you don't do the self-care, when you don't go on that walk that you need to get your like clear your head, or get some fresh air, or just be with your dog, or be alone, like we talked about a little bit, with like less stimulation, you're not going to show up with as much energy, as much presence, and that kind of desire to be connected. You're going to feel a little obligated, but you want to show up really fully there. And I think the self-care is the way you get there. So planning for it, really putting an appointment on your calendar, and again, agreeing to that. That's the point of the planning the week together, of knowing, hey, this is when I'm going to do it because I know you can cover for me. Or, hey, I know we already have the nanny scheduled during this time, so I'm going to take advantage of that, because then in the afternoon, I know we're going to go to the Padre game. In our case, we're like doing that right after this. um, so it's like you're talking through logistically, and you're almost asking that person to help you be accountable for that, of not the part about, oh, spend time with your kids. It's the opposite. It's the, hey, are you taking time for yourself this week? Like I've had him tell me sometimes like, oh, have you done that? I don't see anything on the calendar for you. Like, what are you doing this week? And so that's a really powerful thing you can do for each other, especially in parenthood.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that so much. And I'm just thinking like it's wild to me because I feel like I like every day for me is just like from the moment I wake up until the moment I go to sleep. I feel like I'm just going, going, going. And like really that time is so limited for self-care. And I often see myself not doing a lot of self-care. If I do self-care, it's like I start slipping into like that mindset of like, okay, my self-care is just taking a shower and washing my hair, or something like that. It's really a really hard concept for me, even though not logically I know like I need to take this time to like go out for drinks with my girls, or go to the gym, go to the Pilates class I've wanted to go to. But it's really hard when you feel like you're like giving something up like that. I mean, the way that you describe it, and having the support from your husband in that way, especially, I mean, both of you seem like very busy people. It shows that it's possible. Sometimes for me, I feel like it's not possible, but hearing you say that, and sharing your experience, I'm like, okay, I got this. I can do it.
Yeah. And especially it almost brings me back to the beginning of what we said of like, I didn't sign up for this. It's like, I didn't sign up to have to like schedule my self-care, like that's not what I
Right.
ever thought I would have to do. That really should be my answer. It's that a shower and, the workout, like those, I didn't think a shower would ever be defined as self-care. And then it
Right.
all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, a long shower that was extra hot, and I had time to shave my legs. And it's like, these are
Right.
all like almost comical things now in our world, but yet it's you have to plan for it. And sometimes that might mean like buying that time, which is, the ultimate premise of Peacock Parent, that at some point that might mean investing in support. And, whether that's that mother's helper down the street, she's 13 years old and you can pay her way less money, but she's excited to be there. And maybe you don't leave your house in that moment, but you're upstairs and you're taking a couple hours in your bedroom by yourself. And she's downstairs playing with your kids and having a really great time.
Yeah.
And that's you doing some adult coloring, and or taking a nap. That's also self-care too. That's okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, a nap is the best self-care, I feel like.
I know, me too.
Especially knowing like the kids are taken care of, maybe they're fed before you wake up, so you're not just thrown back into the gauntlet the second that you walk out that door. But I like all of those ideas. Well, perfect. So I really enjoyed our conversation. I want you to share with our audience where they can find you, if you have social media channels, website, any courses or anything like that.
So I'm on Instagram at Peacock Parent, and we share delegation tips, time management tips, all kind of centered on this goal of living a good life and experiencing more joy and more time. We have a website as well, peacockparent.com, and there's a ton of free resources. There's nothing you have to pay for there. There's different guides that really walk through how to define your joy, delegation tips, lists for you, because again, it's hard to know where to start sometimes with this, of here's ideas of what to delegate, here's how to talk to your partner about hiring help. So there's a lot there. We have a newsletter is my last little push for myself is twice a month we send out a blog, and they're really informative. We have a team really helping to write these, research them. The whole goal is to again provide more information in a really digestible way and better resources out there that you can trust.
I love that. I'll link everything in the show notes to make it easy for people to find you. And go sign up for her newsletter. I feel like that sounds so nice just to have one thing in my inbox a couple times a month, which is everything that I need to know. Because I know that I'm struggling with this. A lot of other parents, I'm sure, are struggling with this too. So I appreciate you joining the podcast, Christine. And thanks so much.
Thanks, Caitlin.